Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host. I'm a filmmaker on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode, I pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on streaming. I pick a favourite film from that topic and battle it out against a guest to decide which film would become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Please enjoy part 2. Hello, welcome back to part 2 of the show, and you probably know by now, I say this every single time at the top of part 2, that this is the part where we have a look at your Instagram responses from the previous episode, and that previous episode was on Anya Taylor-Joy movies, and Mr. Y. Shear went with, who is part of the Movie Bonus podcast, went with The Menu. Anton Kinelov, a regular responder, went with X-Men The New Mutants. Someone called Andrew Corns went with The Menu. My brother went with Furiosa and Mad Max Saga. We saw it together in the cinema like a few weeks ago. So yeah, he absolutely loved it. So no surprises there. And John and Georgia from the Comfort Films podcast went with Last Night in Soho. So yeah, not a lot of movies to choose from her work just yet, but it was a fun episode. Yeah, I was tempted to go with The Menu as well. I just found that was kind of a genius ending of that film.
Oh, it's so good.
Like, I love my dark humor, and there's just some great dark comedy in that film. Chef's kiss in terms of comedy.
Yeah.
Pardon the pun.
And I'm so happy to see you survived The Witch.
I did indeed. Yeah, it was just, I don't know if you listened to that episode, but yeah, I was slowly dying inside that my guests weren't that bigger fans of it. I was like, oh no, it's so good though.
It polarizes people though,
Yeah.
because I've got some friends who think it's the biggest pile of crap on
Yeah.
the face of the earth, and then others are like, this is horror,
Yeah.
and I'm on that side for sure.
Yeah, I love The Witch. Certainly when I first watched that, like, wow, it really scared me. I don't know, just something about Robert Eggers films that are just so visceral and just got so much texture to them, incredibly atmospheric.
I assume, are you doing something for Nosferatu later this year, I hope?
Yeah, that'll be January. Yeah.
Okay.
After the Christmas, because it comes out Christmas, doesn't it? So yeah, we'll be hopefully doing a vampire films episode, because we've covered a few Robert Eggers films now. So
That should be good. Yeah, he's only got so many to choose from.
yeah. Right, so this episode we are talking Richard Linklater films, and when you picked Boyhood, I was like, oh man, am I going to win this? I'm not sure. Boyhood's awesome. What am I going to pick? So I was hoping I was going to have the greatest comeback in podcast history, but I'm not sure now. So I was like, what film can I pick that can really compete with Boyhood? Dazed and Confused is great, you know. I'm not sure it's as good as Boyhood, and I know you absolutely love it, but I'm not so sure. And you've got, what's it? A Scanner Darkly, really interesting. He loves an animated film as well. Apollo 10.5 from a few years ago.
Yeah, pretty good.
Which is not bad. School of Rock, you know, I mean, I've seen that quite a few times when I was growing up. That was just, everyone had seen that film, you know.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and he's done a lot of Hangout films, but I had never seen any of the films from the Before trilogy, and I've heard like so many good things about this trilogy. So I was like, you know what, I need to start watching some of these, and you know, why not pick the first one? And I loved watching it so much. I literally watched the second one before sunset, pretty much straight after it, and I might watch Before Midnight tonight. I kind of loved the films so much. I mean, the second one I didn't like as much. I think it is very short, like an hour and 15 minutes or something, almost like a TV episode, it felt like, before sunset, but still incredibly good. And that film's very much about, you know, about this film, Before Sunrise, about them discussing what that was actually like, and did they regret what happened? Can they remember everything that they did? Did they actually have sex or not? That was kind of funny to watch towards the end of Before Sunrise. But yeah, after I watched Before Sunrise this morning, it was just so romantic. Like, they really go full tilt with the romance in this. And one of the first things you notice about this film, pretty much right from the off, is like the chemistry between these two is insanely good.
It's electric.
It's quite remarkable how these two work together. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I was curious why you picked this one at first, and I didn't ask you because I didn't want to know beforehand. It makes sense now that you hadn't seen any of them, and I feel like it's hard. It's going to be hard to talk about this movie without talking about the trilogy as a whole,
right?
Because they all kind of operate together. And this was another movie I threw up on social media on my page just to get the general temperature of what everyone felt. Everyone that responded passionately loves this trilogy, but each of them has different favorites for different reasons. And so it was again fascinating to see who favored Sunrise, Sunset, and Midnight, and why. So very, very curious. I'm curious what you will think of Midnight when you get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happens in Before Sunrise? Well, going to IMDb, as is what happens now in this podcast. A young man and woman meet on a train in Europe and wind up spending one evening together in Vienna. Unfortunately, both know that this will probably be their only night together. Yeah, I absolutely love this film. Initial reactions for you, Andrew, when you first saw this?
I probably saw this one probably early 20s, maybe late teens, so around like 2005, 2006. By the time I saw Before Sunrise, Before Sunset had recently come out.
Yeah.
And so I saw them kind of like right one after the other. And so like they've always been joined together, and then obviously Midnight comes out another 10 years later, and I saw that in real time when it came out.
Yeah.
And it's been a fascinating trajectory because the films have sort of followed my own life, where I've been with the same person for 20 years, and we're now sort of in the Midnight stage, if you are. We have kids. We're older. We're the couple that's now bickering more than, maybe our honeymoon phase or whatever. And so I have lived this movie to a degree.
Been on holiday to Greece?
Not yet. One day.
So directing then, certainly this film is one film where it's hard to pick out, specific directing moments, but I had a go. Like, the thing I noticed about the film is that it's very simply shot, like, clearly a very low budget, very early in Richard Linklater's career. Like, this film is a series of conversations between two people most of the time. So in terms of direction, it would be interesting to know how much thought goes into like framing these two people talking. Like on the train, I feel like the pacing is pretty slow with like the cutting, and there's not much cutting to each other. Say when Ethan Hawke is talking, the shot stays on Ethan Hawke for a while, and we only get like one or two cutaways to Julie Delpy's character for her reaction. You have like, the same thing when the focus is on Julie Delpy as well. So the focus is very much on who is speaking, which sounds like an obvious thing to say, but I think sometimes there's a strong temptation to keep both actors present in the scene to make sure they both feel important in the scene. But here, because like the casting is so good and the acting is so good, Linklater doesn't feel like he has the pressure to keep both characters like feeling like they need to feel important or like all the time in the scene, in the present of the scene. There's just a quiet confidence here in the direction for me.
Yeah, and again, kind of, I'm glad we picked these two films next to each other because there's a lot of parallels. The direction, again, it feels very voyeuristic. It feels like you're watching something that's sort of being shot documentary style. And again, it's two actors with no vanity to their work. Like they're doing the most real, human, honest things that people can do. It doesn't feel contrived. The dialogue doesn't feel like rom-com-y. Everything feels grounded and real. And the only real spots where the direction, I think, kind of caught me, if you will, and because I don't think Linklater's he's not going for catchy, flashy stuff, but just the some of the walks through, whether it's the cemetery or the streets or stuff, there's definitely thought into the logistics of how they're going to get from point A to point B and how much dialogue is going to happen. And so I'm impressed with the way he was able to sort of track the shots to a degree, like where it's not flashy, but like when you watch it time and time again, you start to go, okay, wait a minute, this one shot has gone on for a little while, and there's been a ton of dialogue that's happened, and because of the length of some of these shots, it's the immersion effect where you sort of feel like you're right there next to Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke talking. It's intimate. This film's really intimate, and I give a lot of credit to the direction there.
Yeah, there's a lot of like geographical thought that's gone into the shots for sure. And sometimes like you feel like Vienna itself is a character as well in the film.
For sure.
To inform how they feel about each other. I mean, a lot of people say like Vienna is one of the most romantic cities and filmable cities in the world. Like I remember, my uncle's favorite film of all time is The Third Man. That's all shot in Vienna, and it's just a really great city to just come back to in film in general. So yeah, just from that point of view, it's a great watch. There's one little scene that feels like it's from a completely different movie though, but completely works, where they're both just like sitting at a table outside at night at kind of this cafe, and this palm reader comes to them and starts to read Julie Delpy's palm. And the shots are kind of really quite close in on their faces, Delpy's and this palm reader's. And it's like we've just entered like a fantasy film all of a sudden, because like before, like all the direction has been at a distance, to then all of a sudden we go quite close in, on the palm and on really tight on their faces. So it was just really interesting in that sense. And it was like Ethan Hawke wasn't even in the scene for a moment. It felt quite personal for Julie Delpy's character. So yeah, that was quite a striking scene. Even though when you look at it on its own, it doesn't feel that special. But when you just drop it in the context of this very simply shot film, this very romantic film, it doesn't feel out of place, but it just feels very intimate just for Julie Delpy.
Yeah, for sure. There's one other scene like that. Now, I'll kind of tease it for now. I don't want to reveal it. It's my favorite shot of the film, and it'll come in a little bit. But there's a couple of points in the film where Linklater goes for like kind of extreme zoom-ins on stuff, and I think it's used to great effect in a couple of spots like you just touched upon there.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, just the way he frames shots is interesting, and I love just sort of the simplicity of like when they're playing pinball and just like the camera angles, everything. It's simple, but everything's intentional. It's not like just a guy like, oh, let me just throw my camera up here because like everything feels very deliberate and thought through, but it also doesn't have to feel like he's trying to like hit you over the head with like, hey, I'm a really good director. Like he's confident in who he is.
Give me money for a bigger movie.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like he's happy to do the quiet things and show you the simple moments, because it's the simple moments in life that are honestly sometimes the more romantic moments in life. And I think that's the beauty of this film.
Yeah, absolutely. Favorite shot or scene for me is, I think, the end for me. I loved how like Richard Linklater avoids cheesiness in how he ends the film. Like when they go their separate ways, we don't have like an elongated scene on Ethan Hawke as he's like leaving the station getting emotional, and the same with Julie Delpy. We don't see her like running down the train car to try and catch his eye, lock eyes with Ethan Hawke for the last time as the train leaves the station. We don't have any of that. Like instead, Linklater goes for a more sentimental approach, but in like a really, I feel like sentimentality is always described as being very in a very negative sense, but here I quite liked it. But it's not like slow motion flashbacks of what they've just seen, but instead it's like the empty places that we saw them in, but in daylight this time. It's kind of your job to remember what happened in these places, and it sort of reiterates simply how precious these moments were in their lives. Beautiful stuff for me at the end.
Yeah, beautiful is like the overwhelming adjective to this film. It's just like, and that end there is, it's quiet and it's still, and it allows you as the viewer to absorb what you just saw. And like again, like he's just quietly saying like they were here. We just threw quick little shots, and you're seeing stuff, and you're going, oh yeah, you're sort of remembering all the stuff kind of in real time there at the end. The scene for me, for sure, the shot for me, if you will, it's earlier in the film, and the sexual tension is definitely rising.
Yeah.
And I love the way that they don't have to be physically intimate for things to feel intimate.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a beauty in the early part of the film, is like the conversation is the sort of stimulation and the charge and the spark between the two.
Yeah.
And it's when they go into the record store and they go into that listening booth, and he shoots the camera, so it's almost kind of looking up at them. And the record booth is so small, and the frame of the shot is so confined, and they're so close together, and they don't say a word, and you just hear the song play, and you can feel the tension like increasing, and it's like it feels like explosive at that point. Like the two of them just like want to just like, you know, you become one with each other, and yet nothing ever happens. And that's just such a cool shot that for me encompasses kind of the Before trilogy to a large degree.
Okay. Yeah, I had that moment in acting, but yeah, I feel like as well that's like the only place where he could put the camera. It's so close.
Right, exactly.
It's like, right, come on, let's squeeze all in here. This is the only place I can put it, Richard. Okay, that's fine. Let's just shoot.
And we don't have listening booths here in the States, so I don't know if that's a specific European thing or whatever, but like that's just not a...
Yeah, you do, yeah. I don't think you really have them now, I feel like. We have a few... Well, we have one record shop in where I live, and the shop owner just puts on what he wants for people to listen to, you know. Very expensive in there, though. I don't buy vinyl in there.
I keep my vinyl to like 2 or 3 a year because it's pricey.
Yeah. There's a great like little market on the weekends where I can get cheaper ones.
Yeah, I'll try to like catch like some flea market or like you know, book fair sales for some vinyl, but yeah, very hard.
Yeah, I do like a good vinyl. Directing score then, Andrew, what are you going for?
I'm going to go with an 8.4, and the reason for that is I think that there are other areas of this film that are more prominent to me, and you'll see the scores will be a little bit higher in some other areas, not to tip my hand too much, but I think he does. 8.4 for me is a very strong score. Like he's done a very good job with what he's doing from a direction standpoint, but I think the dialogue and the acting is what carries this film more than the direction itself. And so while I can still give him points for the tracking and the shot locations and all that stuff, I think the direction is probably the least effective of the three components that we're going to break down. And that's not a negative. It's just there are other spots that for me are elevated over this. So 8.4 felt fair.
Yeah, I'll probably go in a similar ballpark as you guys say, probably like an 8.6, because I think just from a casting point of view, you know, that's kind of, you know, the casting director and the director's job to find these people and decide to go with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. And I think you just can't imagine anyone else in these roles. So
for sure,
there aren't many films where the chemistry is that strong, and that kind of starts with deciding to cast these people. So yeah, 8.6 for me. Right, screenplay then. I loved that scene in this cafe when it's like the first time that they really tell each other how they feel about each other and how their time has gone with each other. Like, but they both pretend that they're calling their friend on the phone, and they're both doing like these phone hand gestures by their ear, and it's just a great playful idea to make this type of scene feel fresh, you know, because we've kind of seen this kind of thing a lot before. That's usually quite serious, and it's usually raining and very dramatic and things like that. But this feels very sweet and funny, and yet you feel just as emotional when you're watching it. And it was just wonderful to watch, just seeing their faces change when they say nice things about each other, and then suddenly realize they have to still like play this game pretending to be their friend on the phone. You know, amazing stuff. Yeah,
I love that scene so much.
I think overall, not putting it in directing, but that's my favorite scene, like just, you know, in general. Yeah, for sure.
I would concur with that. Yeah, it's just it's the moment where you see sort of all facets of both of them, where they're sort of like playfully kind of prodding and joking with each other, and they're allowed to be silly and awkward with each other, which is not lot of times when you're like first meeting somebody, you don't want to show your silly side or your awkward side or whatever, you know, and it's like from the get, these two are completely honest with one another, and they're telling each other sort of their deepest, darkest things, and you know, all of their everything they're wearing their emotion on their sleeve very much from the opening get-go. And then this scene is just kind of them really telling each other how much the other means to them in this, like you said, it's playful, it's sweet. The other scene, if I would have to pick one other out that really kind of stood out to me, is the scene a little bit later when they go to the bar and they're trying to like score a couple glasses and a bottle of wine. And I like them that pulling that scam. And I also just have to give a shout out to the bartender. I've never met a bartender that cool before. Like,
neither have I. I mean, if I tried that, he would just give me a funny look. I'm like, are you kidding me? No.
Yeah, like I don't know if that's like uniquely from, you know, Vienna or people in that specific part of Europe that they just want to like, you know, believe in love or whatever the case may be. But like, I'm like, man, if I ever meet a bartender that cool, that would be a good day. You know, he gets the prize for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that would never happen in the UK. No way.
No, never.
What's really interesting about this film is that when these two characters meet, their chemistry is like off the charts. It really is. And they get on so well together, and it's incredibly romantic. They talk about like their opinions on love and the differences between men and women, like a lot of kind of conversations that you would have in a new relationship. I feel like they're having like a great time, but they never address the elephant in the room that we know, and they know that from the start, is that Ethan Hawke has to fly home to America in the morning at 9:30. You know, until this scene on the boat restaurant where they talk about what they should do. You know, should they stay in contact with each other, or, you know, one of them move to Europe or America, but they decide to just make this night amazing and leave it as that, and go their separate ways and say goodbye there and then in this, you know, very sweet and funny way when they say goodbye. It's like they're like taking the pressure off each other, but 9:30 in the morning is still going to come around. You know, there still feels like there's this inevitability that something emotional is going to happen at the end. It's not going to just fizzle out. You know, their relationship is too strong for that at this point in the film. And of course, what happens is it's, you know, very passionate. It's a very passionate goodbye. Like, they kiss each other 3 times, and, you know, the train driver has a lot of patience. And it just feels, you know, very natural and real how they try and deal with this situation of the fact that their night will end in the morning. Yeah, it just feels so real when they talk about that.
Yeah, much like Boyhood, like it's so impressive to me the way Richard Linklater can tap into universal feelings and things that we all go through in life. And the Before trilogy as a totality, like, I remember being in my 20s and sort of having young love and like feeling the emotions like this. And then when you get to Before Sunset, I remember being, you know, a little bit older and, you know, those feelings. And then Before Midnight, like the way he captures emotion and feeling, everyone can relate to it. And I think that's what's so enduring about this movie and the trilogy as a whole, is it's a universal story, but it doesn't have to like feel like When Harry Met Sally or You've Got Mail, where it's like going to have this big sweeping end and like everything comes together nicely and neatly for a rom-com, you know, like it's true. It's authentic. We've all been in these situations, and that's rare in this kind of romantic space in a film.
Yeah. It would be interesting to know as well whether this trilogy was planned from the start, because I don't imagine it was necessarily.
I don't think so.
No, because I mean, you could definitely end it there and not necessarily need the other 2 films. It's interesting watching Before Sunset, and it's a very different tone. You know, they're kind of miserable in that film, whereas with this one, they're very much enjoying, you know, their time together, young love and stuff. And, you know, Before Sunset, it's 9 years later, and they're kind of just really miserable with their lives, and it's just interesting with that, because they decide at the end of Before Sunrise that they will meet each other again, like 6 months on. And it's interesting with Sunset is that, you know, Ethan Hawke did go there and she didn't. And she very much didn't have a choice in that. Her grandmother was sick and died. So, and yet she was yearning for a relationship like they had in this first film. And she just really struggles with that. And Ethan Hawke kind of struggles with just the mundane life of being married as well. So it's just a really interesting decision that they kind of carry on with this story. And just it just brings more depth to it, and it kind of makes this first film feel better as well. It feels more enjoyable after you see the second one, and obviously when I see the third one, I suspect this first and second one will feel even more, just that much more better as well. Even though I wasn't as fond of Sunset as I was Sunrise.
Yeah, I've felt differently about all three of them over time. Like, I think each one of them has held a place as my favorite of the three at various points in time. Currently now, Before Midnight's probably my favorite. Again, just where I am in life is most connected to it. But there was certainly a point in time, I don't know, 12 or 13 years ago, where Before Sunrise was definitely a favorite of mine, you know, in that particular period in time, for sure. You know, and it's totally believable that Ethan Hawke's character in the next film would go to that moment 6 months later. I mean,
oh yeah,
like you buy into that. Obviously, he's going to do that. Like because the connection is so strong from the get go, he can't let go of that. Even though, obviously, you know, the tragedy of this first movie is that it's only, you know, one day we get to see them together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just, I always find like romantic films are always better when they can't be together.
Yes.
So it's a real risk, like doing another film. The fact that they are together, you know. So for some people that might rub them up the wrong way, even though certainly that middle film is still very good, but you don't need it. It's great on its own, Sunrise.
And one of the amazing things about this movie is its influential. How influential it is still to this day. And there's a particular scene in the movie where Jesse, Ethan Hawke's character, is talking about the idea of reincarnation. And he's talking about sort of past lives. And immediately my brain was like, oh, wait a minute. Literally last year, there was a film that came out, Past Lives, which sort of feels like a condensed Before trilogy in one film. And it's like, and that movie sort of has a similar ending that doesn't feel like super, you know, traditional rom-com, but it feels more true to life in a really interesting way. And like when I watch Past Lives now, I'm like, oh my gosh, the amount of influence that Linklater has still to this day is very present.
Yeah, Past Lives was my favorite film of last year. That destroyed me.
Oh, it's so good. So yes,
just
I'm just tears at the end.
Yeah, just incredible performances. Because again, it feels so real. And spoilers for Past Lives, but you know, when we but when we get that last moment, that when the guy decides to leave and go home, and you know, the female character, the I can't remember her name now, but the lead actress is very much keeps it together the whole time, and you feel like she's got her shit together. And yet when she breaks down, it feels so authentic and feels so real and understandable. And it's just kind of great as well from a directional point of that film. It's kind of very much at a distance as well, which makes it kind of feel even more powerful in a way.
Yeah.
So
it's all about body language and like the space between people is very present in Past Lives. And going back and watching Before Sunrise again, I'm like, oh my gosh, like the amount of tension that Linklater is able to create in this movie with just spatial awareness and the proximity of the characters, and when they do and when they don't touch, it's really interesting. And again, just the amount of influence he has over romantic films to this day is remarkable from this movie.
Absolutely. Especially from like a guy dressed as a teenager, or like when you see the behind the scenes stuff, you're like, that's a funky, cool t-shirt. Wow, this is an amazing film. How did you make that? Really? Okay.
Yeah, he seems so unassuming in life, right? Like,
yeah. So funny, interesting lines. Again, I got a bunch. like near the start. I can see it like 24 boring hours, sorry, and a 3-minute sex scene where he falls asleep right after, no? Yeah, I mean, that would be a great episode, yeah. When he's talking about like a TV show near the start on the train. That was funny.
One of the early ones for me is Celine's telling Jesse right when they see the couple on the train fighting, and then she tells him that as couples grow older, women's hearing decreases for low volume and men's decreases for high volume. And Jesse just says to her, he goes, "That's nature's way of allowing couples to grow old together without killing each other." And that was like a dagger to my heart of my own relationship. Just like, again, you're with somebody for 20 years, and it's like you love them to the ends of the earth, but like you eventually you just sort of get on each other's nerves, so our hearing just drops a little bit to keep us together.
Okay. Does your wife listen to this podcast? Or?
She doesn't. I did warn her though.
Okay. Yeah. I love the frankly weird scene when they meet these two Austrians and they're like describing their play, and he says, "Yes, I am the cow, and the cow is a bit weird. The cow has a disease. She's acting a bit strange like a dog." I'm like, okay. And I'm not surprised they did not go to the play.
I want a movie about the play, though.
Yeah.
I wrote down I can't remember the name of the play, but it had a hilarious name, too. Yeah, that was a good line for sure.
Yeah. And I like the little bit where Ethan Hawke is like putting words in these two monks' mouths as they're walking by, and he says, "Hey, Hans, I have a confession to make. I'm not wearing any underwear underneath this thing." "Oh, really? Does that frighten you?" It was great. Just getting Jesse's funny side across.
Some of the really deep philosophical stuff that Jesse specifically says just really resonate with me. Like there's a line he says to Celine at one point. He says, "People always talk about how love is totally unselfish, a giving thing, but if you think about it, there's nothing more selfish than love."
Yeah.
That one, again, is just really like on the nose, deep. When you think about that, like that's very true, like it's selfish to want to love someone so much. I mean, just these are just things that the screenplay of this movie impresses me, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Julie Delpy, Ethan Hawke, Richard Linklater, they all sat down together and all collaborated on the actual screenplay, which is why it feels really authentic to all three of them. So unlike Boyhood, which feels a little more spontaneous, this one feels like these three got together in a room, wrote down a bunch of stuff, and it really translated.
Yeah, locked themselves in a hotel room and like, let's write this. Yeah, it's interesting with the deep philosophical stuff about love and men and women, and I feel like just because they're talking about these things, that like it just shows their relationship is so deep and like so far down the line already. You kind of definitely get that feel that they shouldn't be talking about these really deep subjects like when they've just met, and that just that's just a testament to how like strong their relationship is and how strong their chemistry is, that they can get away with this kind of writing that where they're talking about such deep stuff that it still feels believable, because I certainly wouldn't be talking about this stuff when I date girls on the first date. Absolutely not.
Well, and I love how ferociously like independent Celine is as a character. Like she's not like trying to sort of put on airs as what she thinks Jesse wants to hear. Like at one point it's pretty early on in the film, and she's like, "I hate the media, they're trying to control our mind, it's very subtle, but it's a new form of fascism." Like that would scare off a lot of people, I feel, if you're just telling that somebody within the first couple hours you meet them.
Yeah.
But she's not afraid to speak her mind and say what's on, what she thinks. And I just find that really beautiful, that these characters are just comfortable with one another from the get-go, and it never dissipates through the whole film.
Yeah, I feel like that line comes from Linklater himself, because you have
for sure
that scene with Ella Coltrane in the car when he's talking about, I don't want Facebook. Who needs that? It's like they're controlling your lives, controlling your dopamine hits with the likes and stuff. I'm like, I'm pretty sure Richard Linklater doesn't have a Facebook page.
Right. I'm sensing a theme with Linklater for over 30 years. He's gone down the YouTube rabbit hole a few times, I imagine.
Then up there in the Ferris wheel, it was like this very old woman kissing this very young boy. It was great. One of my favorites as well, probably second favorite, is from Ethan Hawke when they get given a poem from this random Viennese dude, and he says, "Gotta say, I like this Viennese variation of a bum." It was fun. And like I think they're talking about how you kind of keep yourself sane, in terms of how you keep yourself stimulated, I guess. And I think Ethan Hawke says the only other way to lose yourself like that is, dancing or alcohol or drugs and stuff like that. And Celine just says, fucking. And he's like, fucking? Yeah, that's one way. Yeah.
Yeah. If I had to pick a particular favorite line, though, and it's just another one of those like poignant moments that it doesn't feel like a huge significant point in the movie. It's Celine to Jesse, and she says, "Isn't everything we do in life to be loved a little more?" And again, it's just it's a small line, but it's like a universal thing. Like that is just like cuts right to the bone of like who we are as humans. Everything we do in life. I'm doing this podcast, so hopefully somebody will like me. I don't know. Like everything we do in life is to get one more person to like us a little bit, I guess.
I love the fact that you're on here, man. I love it. So, I think my favorite line, is during that same conversation, I think, from Celine. And she says, I believe if there's any kind of God, it wouldn't be in any of us, not you or me, but just in this little space in between us. And again, that I think it's that universal thing, that unexplained thing about love that we can't really explain in a literal sense. Yeah, it's just, we don't know how love, it's just a kind of a really great poetic way of saying, like, we don't know how love happens or exists or the mechanics of it. It's just that magic quality that happens.
Yeah, it's interesting that you use the word poetry because in a way, and it just kind of clicked right now, this film feels like poetry in moving pictures.
Yeah.
Where it's just, there's something so artistic about it that it doesn't feel like it should be considered a romantic. It's certainly not a rom-com, but it doesn't feel like it's its own thing. It's very much poetry in what you're seeing on screen. And that's a really good analogy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily see that many like straight romantic films where there's no obvious comedy in there. Like these days, if you make a romantic film, it's got to be a comedy as well. I think certainly a lot of modern films now, and what's kind of amazing is that a lot of the best romantic films are LGBTQ films. One of my favorite films of all time, and I watch it regularly, is Carol, Todd Haynes' Carol. Like, again, another film
unbelievable,
where Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara have insanely good chemistry, and just the look and feel of that film, of that period setting, is just amazing. And Portrait of a Lady on Fire is another one, which, again, palpable stuff in terms of their relationship in that. Quite an amazing film. But, they're both period films, and you don't necessarily have that many straight romantic films set in the modern day now. And it's more, certainly in the TV landscape, I'm thinking of like Normal People, the British TV show. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's an exceptional...
With Paul Mescal, yeah.
Yeah, that's an exceptional piece of work that certainly destroyed me. Yeah. Took me back a lot. That show. But yeah, it's what Richard Linklater has achieved here is quite amazing and fairly rare even now. I feel like, not even just talking about the other two movies, just with this one, it's just pure romance. And yeah, I'm a sucker for a great romantic film.
Oh, me too, for sure, yes.
So screenplay score, Andrew, what are you going for?
I'm going to go with a 9.2. I feel very strongly about the screenplay here. Again, I think like you said, it feels like these three locked together in like a weekend in a room and just like hammered out the plot, the script, everything. It came together in this really great way. There's subtle lines, there's bigger lines, there's great stuff in the entire film. And I think that the screenplay just soars as this movie goes on. I mean, that's the whole point of this movie, is it's two people talking for 90 minutes. And it never once feels like a drag or a bore. I I go back to it frequently, and it's because the script is so strong.
Yeah. And I feel like they were ready to find the key that they lost until they wrote the screenplay to get out of that room.
For sure. Yes.
Yeah. It's tough. Like, yeah, the screenplay is really good. And I might go a straight 9. Yeah, it's just really good.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of fault or flaws in the screenplay at all.
I guess maybe just a straight 9, because I was getting emotional towards the end, but it didn't bring me to tears, I don't think. And I'm a crier, so maybe because I watched it in the morning, maybe if I watched it at night when I've done it's a long day, then maybe that's on me. But at the time of me watching it for the first time, it was the morning, so it didn't make me cry. So that's just that reason.
That's acceptable. Yeah. I don't think I've ever shed a tear for this film.
Okay,
but that it doesn't detract from like the power of the movie. I'll say Before Midnight definitely has brought me to tears. So we'll see if you're a pool of tears like I am for that one.
Yeah, I mean, the one film that really gets me with major tears recently was The Iron Claw. I was like, oh my god, that's insane. To the fact that I'm afraid to literally watch that movie again. It's so devastating, you know.
Maybe because I knew the history of that particular movie, I was prepared for the trauma that was coming. But yes, it is just definitely an evocative movie.
Yeah, I was stupid and did not research it.
Yeah, so it's just like hitting you one after the other with pain and misery.
Yeah. And there was still another brother that died, and they didn't.
They're like, let's cut this out because it's already too painful.
Yeah, otherwise we might have members of the audience literally killing themselves.
Right.
Spoilers for that film. Acting for Before Sunrise. I loved the little scene on the train from Ethan Hawke where they pull into Vienna and Ethan Hawke comes back to meet Julie Delpy at her seat. And when he asks her to come with him to Vienna, you can see the nervous tension on his face. It's quite subtle because it's a crazy idea, but you're willing him to do it. But his story about like his future husband kind of sounds a bit crazy, and there's certainly some cringe into that. That goes into that, and you're quite relieved and happy for him when she says yes, she will go with him to Vienna. So it's just like a nice dorky moment for Ethan Hawke when, you know, the whole time on the train with Julie Delpy, he's been very confident. And yeah, it's the first time where you kind of feel nervous for him.
Yeah, because even at that particular point in time, he's still kept the slightest arm's length from her in terms of he hasn't fully revealed why he's in Europe at the time. He's said he was going to see a friend in Spain, basically, but he hasn't at that point revealed that he's just, you know, had a heartbreak moment. So like as an audience member, you don't know that he's kind of in a vulnerable place at that moment. He's putting on a really cool air, but yeah, that's a great point that he's definitely vulnerable in that moment. He's taking a swing and, you know, he's praying. And as an audience member, you're like, please get off this train with him. Like, he looks like a little sad puppy dog.
Yeah. He's like, I know what I'm saying is stupid, but please come with me.
Right.
I'm trying this line out.
Yes. And because she's such a strong, empowered female character.
Yeah.
Like
she can see through that and like, yeah, I feel sorry for you right now a little bit, but you didn't need to say that. I will definitely come with you.
Yeah, I mean, she's like on the front end of like female empowerment. Like, like when you think about mid-90s movies, there weren't a lot of women getting roles like this where, you know, they're sort of driving the film and they're, you know, not taking any shit from any guys or anything like that. And so I love seeing the way Julie Delpy is as an actress. You know, she's very confident in herself and, you know, she doesn't look like stereotypically what you'd consider like a sex symbol or anything like that, but she's got a grace and a beauty and a confidence to herself that's just really cool to see.
Absolutely. You've mentioned it already, but I love the little scene in the listening booth at the record store. Like Ethan Hawke is great, where every time Julie Delpy is looking away from him, Ethan Hawke looks at her smiling. But as soon as she looks at him, Ethan Hawke looks away, feeling awkward and embarrassed a little bit. And you have like the same with Julie Delpy too, but she's not exactly like smiling at Ethan Hawke when she's looking at him. But it's like she's trying to figure him out, like just a brilliantly awkward and kind of tender scene with that, great camera angle, as you say.
I'm glad we didn't get too many other side characters to like detract from. I mean, this is very much a two-person piece, and in a positive way. Like, you get those couple of strangers that they meet early when they land in Vienna, and the guys who are trying to get them to go to that show, and then you get the palm reader, you get the milkshake poem guy,
bartender,
a couple of small characters, and they all serve their role for what they need to do. But like, this is a very much a two-person thing, and they're both acting their butts off. And it's them. That this movie is entirely dialogue and acting. That is front and center. And if those things don't work, the whole film collapses on itself. And the fact that we're talking about it 30 years on kind of speaks to the power of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love the scene at the end where they're both like standing on the train platform at the station saying goodbye to each other. They passionately kiss like 3 times. You can see the emotional panic in their eyes and the sudden realization that this is going to be like the last time they see each other. You can really feel that on their faces. Then Ethan Hawke's like, they want to see each other again. Right. And she's like, yeah, of course. Then the panic increases trying to work out when to see each other again. Watching it is very frustrating because it's in the mid-90s and pre-internet, so they just can't just give each other their mobile numbers. Then when they're going their separate ways, I loved just the emptiness that they used to giving off in their kind of their own way. Like, I liked how they're not crying either, because I think that would be too cheesy. That was great. That last scene.
I love the sort of the final scene of the night, if you will, where they're, they've already gotten the wine and everything, and they're in the grass and they're laying together, and you don't know if they're going to sort of like consummate the night, and they're going through that, and there's obviously the ambiguity to it at this point in the film or whatever. And I just love the chemistry between the two carries through the whole movie, and it's all done in subtlety and body language, and obviously we talked about past lives, and you can see directors have pulled from this film over and over again. It's so well crafted in its simplicity, and that's kind of the overall takeaway I get from this every time I go back to it. Is I'm like, it honestly shouldn't work when you really think about it on paper. Like, we're gonna give you a movie, and it's just gonna be 2 people walking around talking for 90 minutes, and they'll kiss a little bit, and they'll but they're not gonna end up together. Don't worry, like, it's like, what? Like, how is that supposed to work? And yet it's like this incredible, beautiful story that has resonated with generations at this point. It's kind of, it's magic that it's still sort of in the zeitgeist.
I mean, this script would never get past any Hollywood executive. No way.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine them trying to make this today.
I mean, the guy must be looking at Richard Linklater like, are you serious? No, goodbye.
Right. Yes.
And boy, did they regret that decision.
I also, really quickly, and this is kind of a detour, but to Ethan Hawke's character, early on in the film, I don't know if you remember, he's pitching the idea of like a show he wants to create. And he basically pitches the Truman Show in 1996. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what is happening here? Like, that film comes 2 years later, but I'm like, it sort of hit me at that moment. I'm like, did Richard Linklater just create the Truman Show? Like,
Maybe.
And then, tying back to Boyhood, we didn't talk about it, but at one point when they're camping, they're talking about Star Wars before Star Wars got rebooted.
That was funny. I love that.
And I'm like, does Linklater have like a crystal ball? Like, what is happening here? This guy.
Linklater must be like, oh man, that is not cool, Disney. What are you doing?
Right. Should have put a copyright on that earlier or something.
I mean, the kiss on the Ferris wheel is definitely one of my favorite scenes as well from an acting point of view. It just felt like really tender and beautiful, and just brought out kind of the little girl in me, maybe. And just like, this is just really sweet and amazing. And I just feel like it's one of those scenes where it kind of similar to Boyhood, where maybe, Linklater was just like to the actors, these are the lines, just do it, do it how you feel like you want to do it. And and you can really feel how authentic it is and how real it is in that moment especially. You know, they don't really string it out. They just kind of, they kiss, you know, and it's just really, it just feels very natural.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of trust between I get the sense it's probably this way with everything Linklater does, but clearly the people he works with, and he obviously works with certain people over and over again, Ethan Hawke being the key one, but like there's a level of trust that people feel working with him and vice versa. He clearly feels trust with actors to get stuff out of these little intimate moments, and it's going back and watching these movies so close together just kind of really hammered home, like we don't talk about Richard Linklater as like this all-time great director the way we do a lot of his contemporaries, but he's really built this incredible body of work. Movies like this really highlight, like he has the quiet self-confidence that Ethan Hawke gives off in this movie, you know? Like it feels like an extension of Linklater is the Ethan Hawke character to a degree.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's the sentence to describe Linklater's work, is just, and him as a director, he just has this quiet confidence. He doesn't make big flashy films, and he has his experimental side as well with his animation films, and you know he's done a lot of comedy as well. So yeah, I feel like definitely Linklater should be up there as one of the auteur directors and talked about a lot more as one of the greats. But you know, just because he's not big and flashy and doesn't do like big hard-hitting subjects doesn't mean he shouldn't be in that conversation.
Yeah, he's kind of unassuming in his work, and you know, he just cranks movies out and he doesn't make a big deal about it, and then that's his own demise, is he's not letting his work sort of, he's not like rising it up.
Yeah, and he's one of those that's kind of self-taught as well. I don't think he went to film school, I don't think. So very similar to Chris Nolan and Tarantino, people like that. Favorite performance, Andrew? Who are you going for?
I'm going to go with Julie Delpy.
Okay.
Again, this is just one of those scenarios where I think Ethan Hawke is completely comfortable letting someone else shine. I think that in Boyhood, he let Patricia Arquette do her thing, and I think Julie Delpy, because she's so independent, she's so strong, it's such a impressive character for this time period. I had to sort of have that be my takeaway, was she embodies a lot of, I think, that kind of 90s feminist movement that was coming up. And it just really impressed me to see it all kind of encapsulated in her work.
Yeah. This was so hard to choose between, you know, the bartender and between Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy. Very difficult. But I think I'm going with Ethan Hawke because I think they're equally as good for me. It's so difficult to choose, and I think I went with Hawke mainly because I related to him more. I could see myself in this character and a little bit, and yeah, I just resonated with him a little bit more just through that sense alone, really. Yeah, Ethan Hawke for me.
Yeah, it's kind of a perfect balance between the two. It was like I could have flipped a coin. Tomorrow I might feel the other way, but they're elevating each other every time.
Acting score for you, Andrew, what are you going for?
This was a tough one because it's only two actors. And so it's like, I feel like I have a hard time grading because they're tremendous. But I also, again, I can't, it's hard for me to separate this from the other before films in which I know what happens and what they do in those movies.
Right.
I'm going to give it an 8.8.
Okay.
I feel like it's very, very strong, but it's just the start of something. Like there's more to the story, unfortunately, because I know this isn't just a one-off thing, and so it was hard for me to kind of break it off. But I feel like they're both at this point in their career at a really good point, but they both elevate over the next 10, 15 years of their career. So I felt 8.8 was strong. They both get better though over time.
I think I'm going to go in the 9s. I think this is my favorite element of the film for sure, and just through their chemistry is off the charts, as we've both kind of said, and you know, and it's up to the actors to really elevate. I mean, it's an exceptional script, but it's up to the actors to really elevate it to something special. And I think this is something special and, right up there for me in one of my favorite romantic films now. I mean, I did not plan to watch the next film straight after. I did not at all. I didn't think I would have time, frankly. But no, I felt so compelled to watch the next one because I enjoyed these two performances so much. So yeah, I'll probably go and also because there's only really two actors, I can't go too high. If there was a bigger cast and they were all equally as good as Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke, then it might be a little bit higher. But yeah, I'll go a 9.2 for me. Right, let's add up the scores then for Before Sunrise.
This could be a close one. Have you ever had a tie before?
We have, a long time ago. Before Sunrise gets 53.2. So only practically 1 point in it. And Boyhood wins this episode again. Andrew is 2-0. Well done, sir. You know how to pick a winning movie on this podcast. Frankly, I didn't really stand a chance, but
I felt pretty confident going in.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure where you'd stand on Boyhood, so I'm happy that you enjoyed it as much as I did.
I really do like Boyhood as well. But next episode, as Horizon Part 2 is out, the second part of Kevin Costner's Western epic, will be out at the cinemas. We'll be naturally talking about Kevin Costner and his movie career, and hopefully have new guests from Spyro and Lee take on the Academy, another Oscar-themed podcast. So that should be very exciting. Andrew, as ever, you have been fantastic and always so insightful in your film knowledge and just great to chat to. This is your opportunity again to tell us about your podcast, and where can we find you, sir?
Sure. Yeah. Again, thanks for having me. It's been a great 2 episodes so far. Maybe I'll get a call for a thrice appearance at some point.
Absolutely.
The show Revisionist Almanac, again on all the socials at Rev Almanac. I go back with guests each particular month, and we look back on past Oscar ceremonies with the luxury of hindsight to determine what should have won, and ultimately it goes up to the audience to decide what goes into the almanac. And coming up here in about a month, we've got our 1994 episode, which is going to be Forrest Gump, Shawshank Redemption, Pulp Fiction, Lion King. It's going to piss some people off. We've already got some feedback from people online that are saying that they might unfriend me if I pick the wrong movie. So we'll find out what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, Pulp Fiction certainly got robbed though. Yeah, for me, for sure.
I'll keep it. I love all of those movies, and Pulp Fiction and Shawshank's going to be a tough one to choose from for sure.
Yeah, and The Lion King was the first film I saw at the cinema, the very first one, and I shouted out, "There's a mouse!" Apparently, I said right at the start, and it soon got eaten.
I picked a good mid-year special because I thought there's a bunch of movies that year that everyone has incredible opinions on, and I think people are going to come out mad and happy, and the voting's going to be crazy. So looking forward to that one.
Yeah, right. It is time to say goodbye, people. I know, very sad indeed. It is goodbye from Andrew. Goodbye.
It's so sad, Martin, that I think we need to do this again in 6 months. I can't say goodbye.
It is goodbye from me. I'm going to take a trip on the train to Vienna and see if there's some angry German couples around and see what happens. Bye-bye. That's it for part 2. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out part 1 if you haven't done so already. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell me what your favourite films are relating to the episodes. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for X at FVF_podcast. Plus, we are now on YouTube, so hit that like button and comment there. If you do, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.